The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Petaluma, California, as Olivia Wilson clutched her small traveling bag tightly against her swollen belly, the whispers and cruel stares of townsfolk following her like vultures circling dying prey. It was 1873, and the daughter of the town's most respected doctor had committed the unforgivable sin of conceiving a child out of wedlock, a transgression that had transformed her from beloved daughter to shameful outcast overnight. "You have until sundown to leave," her father had told her, his voice cold as winter frost, medical bag in hand as if prepared to treat the sickness of her disgrace. "I will not have your shame taint this family's name any further." Olivia had wept, begged, explained that Samuel, the traveling salesman who'd promised to return and marry her, had disappeared without a trace after their passionate encounter. Her pleas fell on ears deafened by propriety and social standing. "Father, please," she had whispered, one hand protectively over the gentle swell of her 5-month pregnancy. "Where will I go, doctor?" Wilson had looked at his only daughter, his eyes reflecting not the love of 20 years raising her but the disappointment of a man whose reputation now hung by a thread in a town that thrived on gossip and moral judgment. "That is no longer my concern, Olivia. You made your choice." Now, as Olivia walked past the general store where she had once been greeted with warm smiles, Mrs. Patterson pulled her young daughter closer, as if Olivia's condition might be contagious. The banker tipped his hat downward to avoid meeting her gaze. These were people who had known her since childhood, who had praised her piano playing at church socials and complimented her father on raising such a fine, virtuous daughter. Olivia kept her chin up, despite the burning humiliation coloring her cheeks. She had exactly $3.42 to her name, hastily gathered from the small tin where she'd saved earnings from helping at her father's practice. Her mother had slipped her an extra $1 and a small gold locket when her father wasn't looking, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I am sorry, my darling girl. Write to me when you're settled." The stagecoach depot loomed ahead. Olivia had no destination in mind, only the desperate need to be anywhere but Petaluma. The morning coach was loading, passengers climbing aboard for Sacramento. "One ticket," she said to the clerk, her voice smaller than she intended. "The farthest I can go for $3. The clerk, a man who had once tipped his hat to her on Sundays, now looked through her as if she were a ghost. "That'll get you to Fairfield. Coach leaves in 10 minutes. Olivia nodded, taking the ticket with trembling fingers. Fairfield was only the beginning of her journey into uncertainty. She had no friends there, no prospects, and a child growing steadily within her. The thought made her dizzy with fear. As she waited, a woman with a pinched face and expensive clothing approached the depot. Mrs. Hargrove, the wife of Petaluma's mayor, stopped abruptly upon seeing Olivia. "Well," she said loudly enough for others to hear, "it seems the trash is finally being collected from our fine town." Olivia flinched but said nothing. Words were luxury items she could no longer afford. Fighting back tears, she boarded the coach when called, finding a corner seat away from the other passengers. As the coach lurched forward, she allowed herself one backward glance at the only home she had ever known, now closed to her forever. The journey to Fairfield passed in a blur of dust and discomfort. The jolting of the coach sent occasional pains through Olivia's lower back, and she prayed silently for her baby's well-being. By late afternoon, she stepped down onto unfamiliar ground, her legs stiff and her spirits lower than they had ever been. Fairfield was smaller than Petaluma, a crossroads town serving ranchers and farmers. The busy trading post and scattered buildings, offered little welcome to a young woman in her condition. Olivia walked slowly down the main street, uncertain where to go or what to do next. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since the previous evening, but she dared not spend her remaining meager coins on food just yet. A small cafe caught her eye, and she hesitated outside, drawn by the smell of fresh bread. Perhaps they needed help. She could wash dishes, serve customers, anything to earn enough for a meal and a place to sleep. The cafe owner, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands, looked Olivia up and down, her eyes lingering on her swollen middle. "I don't need no trouble," she said before Olivia could even ask. "Folks around here are God-fearing, decent people." Olivia felt the blow of the words as surely as if she'd been struck. "Please," she whispered, "I can work hard." The woman shook her head. "Try the saloon down the way. They ain't so particular about morals." Dusk was falling as Olivia continued down the street, each step heavier than the last. The saloon, the cafe owner mentioned, blazed with light and raucous laughter. She couldn't bring herself to enter such a place. Not yet. Not while she still had 42 cents and a shred of the dignity her father had tried to strip from her. Instead, she found herself at the edge of town where a small creek bubbled over smooth stones. She sat down heavily on the bank, finally allowing the tears she had held at bay all day to flow freely. Her hands cradled her belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. "I am sorry, little one," she whispered to her unborn child. "I do not know what we will do, but I promise I will keep you safe somehow." As twilight deepened into night, the first stars appeared in the vast California sky. Olivia had never slept outdoors before. The prospect terrified her, but exhaustion was claiming her quickly. She found a relatively flat spot beneath a cottonwood tree, using her small bag as a pillow. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by strange sounds and the persistent discomfort of her condition. Morning brought no relief. Olivia woke stiff and chilled, her dress damp with dew. She washed her face in the creek, smoothed her hair as best she could, and steeled herself for another day of rejection and hunger. Her baby moved more vigorously now, as if protesting their circumstances. For 3 days, Olivia wandered Fairfield, begging for work at every establishment. Some turned her away with harsh words, others with pitying glances, but the result was the same. By the 3rd night, she had spent all but her last few cents on small amounts of food, enough to quiet the worst pangs of hunger but far from sufficient. On the 4th morning, with desperation mounting, Olivia overheard 2 men discussing a cattle drive heading north toward Oregon Territory. Ranchers were gathering supplies in town before the long journey. Where there were cattle drives, there were camps. Where there were camps, there might be cooking and washing needed. She followed the men at a distance to where wagons were being loaded on the outskirts of town. Several rough-looking cowboys moved among them, checking supplies and tending horses. Olivia gathered her courage and approached an older man who seemed to be giving directions. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice cracking from disuse. "I heard you're heading north. I can cook and clean. I would work for food and passage." The man looked at her with surprise, taking in her condition and disheveled appearance. "This ain't no place for a woman in your state, miss. Trails rough, dangerous." "Please," Olivia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I have nowhere else to go." The man scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Boss won't like it. We ain't running no charity wagon." "I am not asking for charity," Olivia said with unexpected firmness. "I am offering honest work." Before the man could respond, another voice cut through their conversation. "What's this, Jeb? We taking on passengers now." Olivia turned to see a tall man approaching, his features obscured by the brim of a worn leather hat. When he drew closer, She could see he was younger than she first thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the summer sky. "Girl's looking for work and passage north," Jeb explained. "Told her we ain't in that business." The newcomer studied Olivia carefully, his expression unreadable. "What's your name, miss?" "Olivia Wilson," she replied, lifting her chin slightly despite her circumstances. "Where you headed, Miss Wilson?" "Anywhere that will have me," she answered honestly. Something shifted in the man's expression, a softening around the eyes perhaps. He removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. "I'm Hank Dawson," he said. "Trail boss on this drive. We're headed to Oregon with 2,000 head of cattle and 8 men who eat like wolves. Our cook broke his leg 2 days ago, and these boys are about to revolt over Jeb's attempts at biscuits." Jeb let out a snort of indignation but didn't argue. "Can you really cook?" Hank asked Olivia directly. "Yes, sir. I can make biscuits light enough to float and stew that would make a man forget his troubles," she replied, remembering her mother's lessons in the kitchen. A ghost of a smile touched Hank's lips. "And your condition?" Olivia placed a protective hand over her belly. "I am strong enough to work, Mr. Dawson. This changes nothing about my abilities." Hank exchanged a glance with Jeb, who shrugged. "Come sit by me," Hank finally said, gesturing to a log by a small fire where coffee bubbled in a blackened pot. "Let's talk terms." Those 4 simple words, "come sit by me," were the first kind invitation Olivia had received in days. She followed him to the fire, relief making her legs weak as she lowered herself onto the log. Hank poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "It's strong enough to float a horseshoe, but it's hot." Olivia accepted the cup gratefully, warming her hands around it. "Thank you." "Oregon's a long way, Miss Wilson," Hank said, settling beside her but maintaining a respectful distance. "Trail's hard even for seasoned men. We face rivers, mountains, weather, and sometimes hostile encounters." "I understand the risks," Olivia replied, "but staying here." She didn't finish the thought. Hank nodded slowly. "We can provide food and safe passage. You'll have your own wagon to sleep in the cook's wagon and no man will bother you. That's my guarantee. In exchange, you feed us morning and night. Can you handle that?" "Yes, Mr. Dawson, I can." Relief and gratitude made her voice tremble slightly. "One more thing," he added, his tone serious. "I don't know your story and I won't ask, but my men are decent enough. Still, they'll be curious. You'll get questions." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "I have nothing to hide, Mr. Dawson. I made a mistake trusting the wrong man. My family. They could not bear the shame." Something flashed in Hank's eyes, anger perhaps, though not directed at her. "Shame's a funny thing out here in the West," he said quietly. "Seems to me surviving is what matters most." He stood, settling his hat back on his head. "We leave at first light tomorrow. Jeb will show you the cook wagon and supplies." As he walked away, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Hope. The cattle drive departed Fairfield as dawn painted the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold. Olivia had spent the previous evening organizing the cook wagon, taking inventory of flour, beans, coffee, salt pork, and dried fruits. The wagon itself was simple but sound, with a small bed built into the back where she could sleep protected from the elements. Driving the wagon proved easier than she'd expected, thanks to the gentle pair of oxen hitched to it. They plodded steadily along, following the dust cloud raised by 2,000 cattle and the cowboys who guided them. By mid-morning, Olivia had settled into the rhythm of the journey, her back supported by rolled blankets to ease the strain of her pregnancy. At noon, the drive stopped briefly to rest the cattle near a small stream. Olivia quickly set up a fire and prepared coffee and johnnycakes for the men, who approached her wagon with curious glances and muttered comments. Hank was the first to accept a plate from her hands. "Good morning, Miss Wilson. You managing all right?" "Yes, Mr. Dawson. Thank you for the opportunity." She handed him the food, noticing the strength in his hands and the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he nodded his thanks. The other cowboys followed their boss's lead, introducing themselves one by one. There was Jeb, the grizzled older man she'd met first. Young Billy, barely 18 with freckles scattered across his nose. Miguel, whose quick smile revealed a gold tooth. The Thompson brothers, Abe and Joseph, so similar they could only be distinguished by the color of their bandanas. Frank, a quiet man with a magnificent mustache. And Cooper, whose weathered face suggested he'd seen at least 50 summers. "This here's better than anything Jeb ever made," Billy declared around a mouthful of johnnycake, earning a cuff to the back of his head from the older man. "Mind your manners in front of the lady," Jeb growled, though without real anger. Olivia felt a small smile touch her lips for the first time in days. There's more if anyone wants seconds. They all did, and Olivia found unexpected satisfaction in watching these hard-working men enjoy her cooking. No one mentioned her condition, though she caught them glancing at her belly when they thought she wouldn't notice. The afternoon brought the first real challenge of the journey. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of approaching rain. The cattle grew restless, sensing the change in weather. "Storm coming," Hank announced, riding up beside Olivia's wagon. "We'll need to make camp early, find what shelter we can." He studied the sky with concern. "First rain of spring can be unpredictable out here." Olivia nodded, already mentally planning how to prepare a hot meal under such conditions. "I will be ready, Mr. Dawson." He gave her an appraising look. "You're tougher than you appear, Miss Wilson." Before she could respond, he was gone, riding ahead to direct the herd toward a protected area where rocky outcroppings might provide some shelter from the impending storm. By the time they made camp, the first fat raindrops were beginning to fall. The men worked quickly to secure the cattle while Olivia positioned her wagon to block the wind. She managed to start a fire in a protected spot and hung a large pot of bean stew over it, adding chunks of salt pork and dried onions. The rain came in earnest as darkness fell. The cowboys huddled under canvas tarps stretched between wagons, gratefully accepting the hot stew Olivia served in tin bowls. "You're a godsend, Miss Wilson," Cooper said, his weather-beaten face serious. "Man can face just about anything with hot food in his belly." The others murmured agreement, and Olivia felt a strange sense of belonging she hadn't expected. These rough men had accepted her presence without question or judgment, valuing her for what she could contribute rather than condemning her for her past. Later, as she settled into her small bed in the wagon, listening to the rain drumming on the canvas cover, Olivia placed both hands on her rounded belly. "We might be all right after all, little one," she whispered. "We have found kind people." As if in response, the baby kicked strongly against her palm. Olivia smiled in the darkness, allowing herself to feel cautious optimism for the first time in months. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind muddy trails and swollen streams. The drive continued north, establishing a routine that gave structure to Olivia's days. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, usually biscuits, bacon, and strong coffee, then broke camp and drove her wagon while the men moved the cattle. At noon, there was a quick meal of johnnycakes or leftover biscuits with beans, and in the evening she prepared heartier fare stews, skillets of fried potatoes with salt pork, or occasionally fresh game when one of the men had luck hunting. As days turned into weeks, Olivia's pregnancy advanced. Her back ached constantly from the wagon's movement, and her ankles swelled despite her efforts to rest when possible. She never complained, but Hank Dawson noticed. One evening, about 3 weeks into the journey, he approached as she stirred a pot of venison stew, the result of a successful hunt by the Thompson brothers. "You need to rest more," he said without preamble, his tone making it clear this wasn't merely a suggestion. Olivia straightened, one hand automatically moving to support her lower back. "I am managing fine, Mr. Dawson." "You're not," he countered, his blue eyes direct. "I've watched you wince every time the wagon hits a rut. From tomorrow, Billy will drive for you. You can ride inside and do your preparations when we make camp." "That is not our agreement," Olivia protested. "I am to earn my passage." Hank's expression softened slightly. "The agreement was for you to cook, not drive yourself to exhaustion. The men need you well enough to feed them, and that child you're carrying needs you healthy." His concern caught her off guard. In Petaluma, her pregnancy had been viewed as a mark of shame. Here, in this company of rough cowboys, it was simply a condition to be accommodated. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That is very considerate." Hank nodded once, then gestured to the pot. "Smells good. The boys are getting spoiled by your cooking. They'll never want to go back to trail food after this." A small smile touched Olivia's lips. "Perhaps that was my plan all along, to make myself indispensable." Hank's laugh was unexpected, a rich sound that transformed his serious face. "Well, it's working, Miss Wilson. It's definitely working." That night, Olivia lay in her wagon bed thinking about Hank Dawson. Unlike the other cowboys, who had gradually become more talkative around her, sharing stories and jokes, Hank maintained a certain reserve. He was unfailingly polite, ensuring she had what she needed for cooking and checking on her welfare, but he revealed little of himself. Occasionally, though, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the leering look she'd experienced from some men in Fairfield, nor was it the pitying glance her father had given her before closing the door on her life. It was something else entirely, a look of quiet assessment, perhaps even admiration. The thought was both unsettling and strangely warming. Olivia reminded herself sternly that she was in no position to entertain such notions. She was an unwed mother-to-be, cast out by her family and society. Hank Dawson was simply a decent man fulfilling his responsibility as trail boss by ensuring all under his care were treated properly. Still, as sleep claimed her, the memory of his laugh lingered pleasantly in her mind. The next morning, as promised, young Billy appeared at her wagon with a shy grin. "Boss says I'm to drive for you, Miss Wilson," he said, twisting his hat in his hands. "Says you're to rest inside and tell me if I ain't doing it right." Olivia couldn't help but smile at his earnestness. "I am sure you will do just fine, Billy. I appreciate the help." True to Hank's prediction, riding inside the wagon was far less taxing on her body, though the constant swaying still required her to brace herself. She used the time to mend torn clothing for the men, having discovered a small sewing kit among the cook's supplies. The simple task reminded her of quieter days in Petaluma, sitting with her mother on the porch as they worked on household linens together. The memory brought an unexpected pang of homesickness. Despite her father's harsh judgment, Olivia missed her mother terribly. Sarah Wilson had been caught between her husband's rigid principles and her love for her only daughter, unable to openly defy Dr. Wilson but heartbroken at Olivia's banishment. "I wonder if you think of me, Mother," Olivia whispered, her needle pausing mid-stitch. "I wonder if you know I am safe." The wagon hit a particularly deep rut, jolting Olivia from her thoughts. Outside, she heard Billy apologizing profusely. "It's quite all right," she called back, resuming her sewing. Dwelling on the past would do her no good now. Her future and her child's lay ahead, not behind. That evening, as the drive made camp near a small tributary of the Sacramento River, Hank announced a day of rest for the following day. "Cattle need to graze and recover," he explained as the men gathered around the fire after supper. "We'll use the time to repair equipment, tend to any sick animals, and resupply. There's a small trading post about 2 miles west where we can get coffee and flour." The news was met with approval from the cowboys, who welcomed the chance to rest their saddle-sore bodies. For Olivia, it meant a day without the constant motion of the trail, a blessing for her increasingly uncomfortable condition. Early the next morning, after preparing breakfast, Olivia decided to make use of the nearby river to wash clothes and herself. Gathering soap, a change of dress, and the men's shirts that needed cleaning, she made her way to a bend in the river sheltered by willows. The water was cool but not unpleasantly so under the warming spring sun. Olivia worked efficiently, scrubbing the trail dust from the shirts and laying them on sun-warmed rocks to dry. When the laundry was done, she moved to a more secluded spot to bathe, keeping her chemise on for modesty while washing her skin and hair. As she emerged from the water, wringing moisture from her long brown hair, a sound made her freeze. Someone was approaching through the willows. Heart pounding, Olivia quickly reached for her dress, struggling to pull it over her wet chemise. "Miss Wilson, are you there?" It was Hank's voice, and he sounded concerned rather than intrusive. "One moment, please," she called, hastily fastening the buttons of her dress with trembling fingers. When she stepped out from behind the willows, Hank was standing with his back purposefully turned toward the river, hat in hand. "I apologize for disturbing you," he said without turning. "When you didn't return to camp, I became concerned. I was washing clothes and—" "Myself," Olivia explained, smoothing her damp hair. "You may turn around, Mr. Dawson. I am decent." Hank turned slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "The men are riding to the trading post. I thought you might have needs we could purchase for you." Olivia considered this. Her supplies of personal items were indeed dwindling. "That is thoughtful of you. I could use soap and perhaps some thread if they have it." Hank nodded. "Anything else for the baby?" He gestured vaguely toward her belly. The question touched her unexpectedly. No one had considered the needs of her child before, except as a problem to be solved or hidden away. "Perhaps some flannel if available," she said softly. "For wrapping." "I'll see to it," Hank promised. His eyes lingered on her face, noting something that made his brow furrow. "You've got a burn starting on your cheeks from the sun. We've got salve in the medical supplies. You should use some." Before Olivia could respond, he bent down and picked up the bundle of clean shirts she had left on a rock. "I'll take these back for you." "Thank you," she said, gathering her washing supplies, "for checking on me, and for the offer of supplies." They walked back to camp together, a comfortable silence between them. Olivia was acutely aware of his tall presence beside her, solid and reassuring. At the camp, Hank handed the clean shirts to Jeb for distribution and then went to his saddlebags, returning with a small tin of salve. "For the sunburn," he explained, offering it to Olivia. Their fingers brushed as she accepted the tin, sending an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the sun's effects on her skin. "I will return it when I am finished," she said. "Keep it," Hank replied. "Trail's long and the sun gets stronger as we head north." With that, he rejoined the other men preparing to ride to the trading post, leaving Olivia with the curious sensation that something had shifted between them, though she couldn't quite name what it was. Later that day, as she sat in the shade of her wagon mending a tear in her shawl, Miguel approached with a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Boss asked me to bring you these, señorita." he said, handing her the package. "From the trading post." Inside, Olivia found not only the soap and thread she had requested, but also several yards of soft flannel in a pale yellow color, a packet of peppermint candies, and unexpectedly, a small book of poetry. The thoughtfulness of the gifts left her momentarily speechless. The flannel alone would have been sufficient, but the candies a luxury she hadn't enjoyed since leaving Petaluma, and especially, the book suggested a consideration of her as a person with needs beyond the merely practical. When Hank returned with the others, Olivia was preparing the evening meal, a rabbit stew enhanced with wild onions she had discovered growing near the river. She approached him as he unsaddled his horse. "Thank you for the supplies, Mr. Dawson," she said. "The flannel is perfect, and the other items. Very kind." Hank continued his work, not meeting her eyes. "Thought you might want something to occupy your mind besides cooking and mending. Trader said it's popular with ladies back east." Olivia held the small volume of Tennyson's poems in her hands. "I have always loved poetry. My mother and I used to read together in the evenings." Something in her voice must have betrayed her emotion, for Hank finally looked at her, his expression softening. "Family's important," he said simply. "Hard to be without them." It was the opening to a conversation about her situation that no one had yet dared to initiate. Olivia took a deep breath, deciding that honesty was the only path forward. "My father is a doctor in Petaluma," she said quietly. "When he discovered my condition, he gave me until sundown to leave town. My mother slipped me money and this locket." She touched the small gold pendant at her throat, but she couldn't openly defy him. Hank's jaw tightened. "And the father of your child?" Olivia looked down. "A traveling salesman named Samuel Everett. He promised to return and marry me. He never did." "Some men don't deserve the title," Hank said, his voice low and hard. "A real man stands by his responsibilities." "Yes," Olivia agreed softly. "I learned that lesson at great cost." Hank finished with his horse and turned to face her fully. "Your father was wrong to cast you out, Miss Wilson. A man protects his family, especially when they are vulnerable." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Your child is fortunate to have a mother with your courage." The unexpected praise brought tears to Olivia's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, unwilling to seem weak. "Supper will be ready soon," she said, changing the subject. "The rabbits were fat and should make a good stew." Hank nodded, allowing her the dignity of the moment. "Looking forward to it." "No one makes stew like you do, Miss Wilson." As he walked away to join the other men, Olivia realized that in this unlikely place, surrounded by strangers who owed her nothing, she had found more acceptance and respect than in the community where she had spent her entire life. That night, after the men had eaten their fill and settled around the fire with coffee and tobacco, Olivia retreated to her wagon with the book of poems. The small oil lamp cast just enough light to read by, and she lost herself in Tennyson's verses until the baby's vigorous kicking demanded her attention. "Are you a lover of poetry too, little one?" she murmured, placing her hand where the movement was strongest. "Or are you objecting to my stillness after so many weeks of motion?" A particularly strong kick made her laugh softly. "Very well, I understand. You are making your opinions known early." A shadow fell across the wagon opening. "Miss Wilson, may I approach?" Hank's voice surprised her. It was unusual for him to seek her out after the evening meal. "Yes, Mr. Dawson," she replied, setting aside the book. He appeared at the wagon's tailgate, still maintaining a respectful distance. "I wanted to check if you need anything before we continue tomorrow. The trail gets rougher from here as we start climbing toward the foothills." "I believe I have everything I need," Olivia said. "Billy has been very careful with the driving." Hank nodded. "He's a good kid, eager to please. He hesitated, then added, I also wanted to ask. When is your child due to arrive? The question was direct but not impertinent given the circumstances. Olivia calculated quickly. Approximately 6 weeks, I believe. Perhaps early July. Concern crossed Hank's features. We should reach Oregon by then, but it will be close. He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. There's a settlement about a week ahead, Sacramento, larger than Fairfield. You might consider staying there. Olivia finished for him, a note of alarm in her voice. Please, Mr. Dawson, I would rather continue with the drive. I have no connections in Sacramento, no means of supporting myself. It would be safer for you, Hank pointed out. Childbirth on the trail is dangerous. Life is dangerous, Mr. Dawson, Olivia replied with quiet determination. I have delivered babies alongside my father since I was 16 years old. I understand the risks better than most. Hank studied her face in the lamplight. You're certain? Yes, she said firmly. Unless you wish to be rid of me, the suggestion seemed to startle him. No, that's not it at all. The men would mutiny if I sent away the best cook we've ever had. A rare smile softened his features. And we've grown accustomed to your company. The slight correction didn't escape Olivia's notice, but she chose not to acknowledge it. Then it's settled. I stay with the drive to Oregon. Very well, Miss Wilson, Hank conceded. But I insist that as your time grows closer, you tell me of any difficulties. We have some medical supplies, and Jeb has basic knowledge from his Army days. I will, Olivia promised. Thank you for your concern. Hank tipped his hat slightly. Rest well, Miss Wilson. Morning comes early on the trail. As he walked away into the darkness, Olivia returned to her book, but found it difficult to concentrate on the words. Hank Dawson was becoming something of a puzzle to her, the reserve trail boss who noticed sunburned cheeks and bought poetry books for a woman most would have shunned. The drive continued northward the following day, leaving the Sacramento River Valley and beginning the gradual ascent into more rugged country. The pace slowed as the terrain became more challenging, requiring careful navigation of narrow passes and rocky slopes. Olivia found that despite Billy's careful driving, the rougher trail increased her discomfort. Her back ached constantly now, and the baby seemed to press against her ribs with every jolt of the wagon. Still, she maintained her cooking duties without complaint, finding satisfaction in the appreciative comments from the cowboys and the growing sense that she was earning her place among them. One evening, about a week after their rest day, the drive made camp in a small meadow surrounded by pine trees. The air was cooler at the higher elevation, carrying the fresh scent of resin and wild sage. Olivia prepared a hearty stew with the last of their venison, supplemented with wild onions and the few potatoes remaining from their supplies. As the men gathered around the fire with their bowls, Cooper looked up at the darkening sky with a frown. Don't like the look of those clouds, he remarked to no one in particular. Feels like snow in the air. Snow, Olivia repeated, surprised. But it's May. Mountain weather's unpredictable, Miss Wilson, Frank explained, his usually quiet voice respectful. Seen snow in June up in these parts. Hank, returning from checking the herd, overheard the conversation. Cooper's right. Barometric pressure's dropping fast. We'll need to secure the camp and cattle before turning in. Could be a rough night. The prediction proved accurate. Shortly after midnight, Olivia was awakened by the sound of sleet pattering against the canvas cover of her wagon. The temperature had dropped dramatically, and despite her blankets, she shivered in the sudden cold. Outside, she could hear the men moving about, their voices raised against the wind as they worked to keep the nervous cattle from scattering. Pulling her shawl tightly around her shoulders, Olivia lit her small lamp and peered out of the wagon. The ground was already whitening with sleet and snow, and the wind drove the icy pellets horizontally through the camp. Without hesitation, she stoked the embers of the cooking fire and set a large pot of coffee to brew. If the men were working in these conditions, the least she could do was ensure they had something hot to warm them. When the coffee was ready, she filled a large bucket with the steaming liquid, added sugar, and covered it to retain the heat. The cold bit through her clothes as she stepped down from the wagon, but she gritted her teeth and made her way toward the sounds of the men working with the cattle. "Miss Wilson." Hank's voice cut through the storm as he materialized beside her, taking the heavy bucket from her hands. "You shouldn't be out in this. The men need something warm," she explained, her teeth chattering slightly. "It is the least I can do." Hank's expression was hidden by darkness and the brim of his hat now crusted with ice, but his voice softened. "That's thoughtful, but you need to get back to shelter. Think of your child." "My child would want its mother to help those who have helped us," Olivia replied, stubborn despite her shivering. Hank made a sound that might have been exasperation or reluctant admiration. "At least take my coat." Before she could protest, he had shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of it, still carrying his body heat and scent leather tobacco, and something indefinably masculine enveloped her immediately. "But you will freeze," she objected. "I'm moving enough to keep warm," he countered. "The men are over by that stand of trees. I'll take them the coffee and be back to escort you to your wagon." True to his word, Hank returned quickly, guiding Olivia back through the intensifying storm with a steadying hand at her elbow. At her wagon, he helped her up the step, his strong hands gentle but firm. "Keep the coat for now," he said when she began to remove it. "I'll collect it in the morning." "Thank you," Olivia said, suddenly aware of how close he was standing, his face illuminated by the soft glow from her lamp. Snowflakes caught in his eyelashes and beard stubble, melting slowly in the relative warmth. For a moment, neither moved. Then Hank stepped back, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that had become familiar. "Stay warm, Miss Wilson. Storm should pass by morning." As predicted, dawn revealed a world transformed by several inches of wet snow, but the sky was clearing to reveal patches of blue. The cattle had weathered the storm without losses, though the day's travel would be delayed to allow the snow to melt and the ground to firm up. Olivia returned Hank's coat when he came for breakfast, having brushed it clean of the worst dampness. "Thank you for the loan, Mr. Dawson. It made quite a difference." He accepted it with a nod. "Glad to help. That was kind of you last night, thinking of the men." "You have all been kind to me," Olivia replied simply. "Kindness should be repaid." A thoughtful expression crossed Hank's face, but he said nothing more on the subject, instead discussing the day's delayed departure and asking if she needed anything from their supplies. The unexpected snow melted quickly under the May sun, and by noon the drive was able to continue, though at a slower pace due to the muddy conditions. The delay meant they would reach Sacramento later than planned, but Hank assured the men they could make up time on the better roads beyond the city. For Olivia, each day now brought increasing physical challenges as her pregnancy advanced. The baby had dropped lower, making walking uncomfortable but breathing somewhat easier. She found herself needing to rest more frequently and was grateful for Billy's careful driving of the wagon. One afternoon, about 3 days after the snowstorm, Olivia was sitting in the shade of a large oak during the noon rest, her back supported by the trunk, when Hank approached with a cup of water. "You're looking tired today," he observed, offering her the drink. Olivia accepted it gratefully. "The heat is more taxing than I expected after the cold snap." Hank settled on the ground nearby, maintaining a proper distance but close enough for conversation. We should reach Sacramento in 2 days. I've been thinking about our discussion, about me staying there. Olivia guessed, a note of apprehension in her voice. Yes, Hank confirmed, but I've reconsidered. If you're still determined to continue with us, I won't press the matter. Relief washed over her. I am, thank you for understanding. Hank picked up a small twig, breaking it absently between his fingers. May I ask what you plan to do when we reach Oregon? The drive ends at a ranch outside of Portland, but you'll need somewhere to settle before the baby comes. It was a practical question that Olivia had been avoiding in her own thoughts. I had hoped to find work in a town nearby, perhaps as a housekeeper or cook, given my experience now. With a newborn, Hank's tone was skeptical but not unkind. Women have managed before, Olivia said with more confidence than she felt. Hank was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant cattle. My sister lives in Portland, he said finally. Hannah, she's a midwife. When we get closer, I could write ahead, ask if she knows of a situation that might suit you. The unexpected offer of help caught Olivia by surprise. You would do that for me? Hank met her eyes directly. Miss Wilson, you've earned the respect of every man on this drive with your hard work and dignity in difficult circumstances. Helping you find your feet in Oregon is the least any of us could do. Emotion tightened Olivia's throat, making it difficult to respond. Thank you, she managed finally. I would be very grateful for such assistance. Hank nodded, seeming almost uncomfortable with her gratitude. He stood, brushing dust from his pants. We should be moving on. Billy will bring the wagon around for you. As he walked away, Olivia found herself watching the straight set of his shoulders and the confident way he moved among men and animals alike. Hank Dawson was unlike any man she had ever known, direct but not crude, strong but not intimidating, and possessed of a quiet integrity that commanded respect without demanding it. For the first time since Samuel Everett's betrayal, Olivia felt a stirring of interest in a man that went beyond gratitude or practical consideration. The realization was both unsettling and strangely exhilarating. Sacramento appeared on the horizon late in the afternoon, 2 days later, its buildings a stark contrast to the wilderness through which they had been traveling. The drive would skirt the eastern edge of the city, but Hank announced they would camp nearby for a day to replenish supplies before the long northern stretch to Oregon. We'll need flour, coffee, beans, and salt at minimum, he told Olivia as they made camp. Is there anything specific you need for cooking? Some dried fruit would be welcome if available, she replied, and perhaps more potatoes. They keep well and are filling. Hank made note of her requests. I'll take Jeb and Cooper into town tomorrow. The rest will stay with the herd. He hesitated, then added, would you care to accompany us? You might want to purchase personal items. The invitation was unexpected. Olivia had assumed she would remain in camp with the other men. Are you certain? I wouldn't want to slow your errands. We'll manage, Hank assured her. Might do you good to walk on proper streets again, see something besides cattle and dust. The prospect was appealing. Olivia hadn't been in a real town since Fairfield, and the opportunity to shop for herself rather than sending requests with others was too good to pass up. I would like that very much, she said. Thank you. The following morning, Olivia dressed with extra care in her cleanest dress, arranging her hair as neatly as possible without a proper mirror. Her condition was unmistakable now, but she held her head high as she joined Hank, Jeb, and Cooper for the ride into Sacramento. The city was bustling with activity, miners heading to the diminishing but still active gold fields, merchants hawking wares, and families going about their daily business. Olivia felt conspicuous as they rode down the main street. acutely aware of curious glances at her pregnant form, perched on a wagon seat between Cooper and Jeb, with Hank riding alongside. They stopped first at a large general store where Hank handled the purchase of bulk supplies for the drive. The proprietor, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers, eyed Olivia with obvious curiosity but said nothing directly to her. "Your wife might like to look at our dry goods section while you conclude your business," he suggested to Hank, misinterpreting their relationship. Before Olivia could correct him, Hank simply nodded. "Miss Wilson, please feel free to select any personal items you need. Put them on our account." The proprietor's expression changed subtly at the "Miss" before her name, and the realization that she was traveling with these men while unmarried and pregnant. Olivia felt the familiar sting of judgment, but refused to let it diminish her. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson," she said calmly, moving toward the section containing fabric, notions, and women's necessities. As she selected a few modest items, a new comb, some ribbon to replace the fraying edge of her shawl, and a small cake of lavender soap, Olivia overheard two women whispering nearby. Traveling with cowboys in her condition. Absolutely shameless. And they're enabling her. What is the world coming to when men encourage such behavior? Olivia's cheeks burned, but she continued her selections with outward composure. When she returned to the counter where Hank was concluding his purchases, she placed her items separately. "These are my personal selections," she explained to the clerk. "I will pay for them myself." The clerk looked to Hank, who shook his head slightly. "Add them to our purchase," he instructed. "Mr. Dawson, that isn't necessary," Olivia protested quietly. "Consider it an advance on your wages," Hank replied, equally low. "You've more than earned it." The transaction completed, they stepped back onto the boardwalk where Cooper and Jeb waited with the wagon. Hank turned to Olivia. "Is there anywhere else you'd like to go while we're in town?" "Cooper and Jeb can start loading supplies." Olivia hesitated. "I should like to send a letter, if possible, to my mother." Hank nodded. "Post office is just down the street. I'll accompany you." They walked side by side down the busy thoroughfare, Olivia increasingly aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. Hank seemed either oblivious or deliberately indifferent to the attention. At the post office, he waited respectfully outside while Olivia purchased paper, envelope, and stamp, then composed a brief note to her mother. "Dear Mother," she wrote, "I am well and traveling north with respectable companions. My child grows strong within me. Please do not worry. I will write again when I am settled. Your loving daughter, Olivia." It was deliberately vague, offering reassurance without details that might distress her mother or provide information her father could use to track her if that was his intention. Olivia had no reason to believe he would search for her, but caution seemed prudent. After posting the letter, she rejoined Hank outside. "Thank you for waiting." "Of course," he replied, offering his arm as they navigated the crowded sidewalk. "Is there anything else you need while we're here?" Olivia shook her head, then hesitated. "Actually, there is one thing. I would like to purchase some small gift for Billy. He has been so careful driving the wagon for me, and I'd like to show my appreciation." Hank's expression softened. "That's thoughtful of you." "There's a tobacconist across the street. Billy's partial to peppermint sticks, if I recall correctly." "Perfect," Olivia said with a smile. "A small indulgence he might enjoy." They crossed to the tobacconist's shop, where Olivia selected several peppermint sticks, paying with coins from her dwindling personal funds. As they exited, Hank suddenly placed a protective hand under her elbow, guiding her quickly toward the edge of the boardwalk. "Keep walking," he said quietly. "Don't look back." Alarmed, Olivia followed his direction but couldn't resist asking, "What's wrong?" Nothing to concern yourself with, Hank replied, his tone casual but his posture alert. Just some rough characters I'd rather avoid. Olivia didn't believe him. His hand was too tense on her arm, his stride too purposeful, but she didn't press the matter as they rejoined Cooper and Jeb at the supply wagon. The return to camp was subdued, with Hank riding slightly behind the wagon rather than alongside, his attention seemingly focused on the road behind them. Only when they reached the safety of camp did his vigilance relax. That evening, after serving the men their supper, Olivia approached Billy with the small paper bag of peppermint sticks. "A token of my appreciation for your careful driving," she said, offering the gift. The young cowboy's freckled face flushed with pleasure. "Gosh, Miss Wilson, you didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she assured him. "You've made this journey much easier for me." Billy accepted the gift with a shy smile. "Thank you, madam, that's mighty kind." Later, as Olivia prepared for sleep in her wagon, a soft tap on the wooden frame drew her attention. Hank stood outside, his expression serious in the fading light. "May I speak with you a moment, Miss Wilson?" "Of course," she replied, setting aside her hairbrush. "Is something wrong?" Hank glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "In town today, I spotted someone who might present a problem. A man named Luther Briggs. He's a bounty hunter of sorts, but not the legal kind. Takes money to find people who don't want to be found." A chill ran through Olivia. "You think he's looking for me?" "I don't know," Hank admitted. "But he was watching us too intently for my comfort. Do you have reason to believe someone might have hired someone to find you?" Olivia considered the question carefully. "My father was very concerned with appearances. Having his unwed, pregnant daughter suddenly reappear would damage his reputation. But hiring someone to find me seems extreme." "People do extreme things to protect what they value," Hank observed. "Is there anyone else who might want to locate you? The father of your child, perhaps? Samuel." Olivia gave a bitter laugh. "He made it abundantly clear he wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. That's why he disappeared without a trace." Hank's jaw tightened. "Well, regardless of who might be looking, I want you to be cautious. Stay close to camp and let one of us know if you see anyone unfamiliar hanging around." The warning left Olivia uneasy, but she appreciated his concern. "I will be careful. Thank you for telling me." Hank nodded. "We'll be leaving at first light. Try to rest well." Despite his reassurance, Olivia found sleep elusive that night, her mind filled with troubling possibilities. Could her father really have hired someone to find her? Or was there some other explanation for the man Hank had spotted? The drive departed Sacramento the next morning as planned, heading northwest on the long trail to Oregon. The terrain gradually changed as they traveled, becoming more forested and lush as they moved farther north. The days grew longer with the advancing spring, providing more daylight for travel. For several days, Olivia watched for any sign of pursuit or strangers observing the drive, but saw nothing suspicious. Gradually, her anxiety about the man Hank had seen in Sacramento faded, replaced by more immediate concerns about her advancing pregnancy and the increasing discomfort of travel. One evening, about a week after leaving Sacramento, as Olivia sat by the cook fire stirring a pot of beans, she felt a sharp, unfamiliar pain across her abdomen. She gasped, dropping the wooden spoon into the fire. Jeb, who was nearby repairing a bridle, looked up at her sound of distress. "You all right, Miss Wilson?" "Yes," she managed, though another pain was already building. "Just a twinge. Could you retrieve the spoon for me, please?" The older man did so, giving her a concerned look as he handed it back. "You're white as a sheet. Should I fetch the boss?" "No, that won't be necessary," Olivia insisted, forcing a smile. "I simply moved awkwardly." Jeb didn't appear convinced but returned to his work. Olivia continued stirring the beans, mentally calculating dates. It was too early, nearly 5 weeks too early for the baby to come. These must be false pains, the kind her father had described to expectant mothers. Practice contractions, he had called them. Still, when the third pain came, stronger than the previous two, Olivia could not suppress a small whimper. This time it was Cooper who noticed. "Miss Wilson." He approached, his weathered face creased with concern. "You don't look well." Before she could respond, another pain gripped her, and she clutched the edge of the cooking pot for support. "Get Hank," Cooper called to Jeb, who was already moving toward where the trail boss was checking horses at the edge of camp. Moments later, Hank was kneeling beside her, his blue eyes intent on her face. "What's happening?" "Pains," Olivia admitted, her medical knowledge overcoming her embarrassment. "But it's too early, much too early." Hank turned to Cooper. "Help her to her wagon, gently now." With Cooper's support, Olivia made it to her wagon, where the pains suddenly intensified. A warm gush of fluid between her legs confirmed her worst fears. "My water has broken," she whispered to Hank, who had followed them. "The baby is coming, whether it's time or not." Hank's expression remained calm, though she could see the concern in his eyes. "Jeb," he called, "break out the medical supplies. Cooper, get water boiling. Billy, find the cleanest cloths we have." The men moved quickly to follow his orders while Hank turned back to Olivia. "What do you need?" Fighting through another contraction, Olivia tried to think clearly. "Clean bedding, water, something to bite down on when the pains come, and privacy when the time comes." Hank nodded. "You'll have all of that. Is there anything I should know about helping with the birth?" "It's too soon," Olivia repeated, fear making her voice shake. "Babies born this early often don't survive." "This one will," Hank said with quiet determination. "It has a fighter for a mother." His confidence steadied her. "Stay with me until it's time, I'm afraid." "I'm not going anywhere," Hank promised, taking her hand in his strong, calloused one. "We'll face this together." The labor progressed rapidly, too rapidly for Olivia's comfort. Each contraction came faster and stronger than the last, leaving her breathless and trembling. Hank remained by her side, his steady presence an anchor in the storm of pain. As night fell, the contractions reached a peak of intensity that had Olivia crying out despite her best efforts to remain stoic. "I think it's time," she gasped between pains. "The baby is coming now." Hank squeezed her hand once, then called for Jeb, who had the most medical experience. The other men discreetly withdrew to the far side of camp, maintaining a respectful distance while remaining close enough to help if needed. What followed was the most difficult and terrifying experience of Olivia's life. The baby was indeed coming, but its early arrival complicated an already challenging process. Through it all, Jeb proved surprisingly knowledgeable and calm, while Hank never left her side, supporting her back when she needed to push and wiping her brow when sweat threatened to blind her. Finally, after what seemed like hours of excruciating effort, Olivia felt the baby slip from her body with a rush of relief and pain combined. For one heart-stopping moment, there was silence. Then a thin, reedy cry filled the wagon, and Jeb announced with gruff emotion, "It's a boy. Small, but he's breathing." Tears of relief and exhaustion streamed down Olivia's face as Jeb carefully cleaned the tiny infant and wrapped him in the soft flannel Hank had purchased in Fairfield. When the older man placed the bundle in her arms, Olivia gazed down at her son's red, wrinkled face with wonder and fierce love. "He's perfect," she whispered, counting fingers and toes that were impossibly tiny yet complete. "He is," Hank agreed, his voice rough with emotion. A miracle on the trail. The baby's early arrival meant he was indeed small, alarmingly so to Olivia's experienced eye. His skin seemed nearly translucent, and his cries, though present, lacked the robust quality of full-term infants she had helped deliver. "He needs to be kept warm," she instructed, maternal instinct and medical knowledge combining, "and fed as soon as possible." Jeb nodded, already placing heated stones wrapped in cloth around the wagon to maintain warmth. "I'll leave you to it, madam. Boss, you need anything else?" "We're fine for now," Hank replied. "Thank you, Jeb. You did well." After the older man's departure, a moment of profound intimacy settled over the wagon. Olivia, exhausted but radiant, cradling her newborn son. Hank, his usual reserve softened by the miracle they had witnessed together. "What will you name him?" Hank asked softly, his gaze fixed on the tiny face peering from the yellow flannel. Olivia hadn't allowed herself to think deeply about names, as if doing so might jinx the pregnancy that had already cost her so much. Now, looking at her son's delicate features, the answer came to her with certainty. "Henry," she said, "after the man who offered kindness when I needed it most." Hank's head jerked up, his blue eyes wide with surprise. "Miss Wilson, Olivia." "You don't need to. I want to," she interrupted gently. "Without you, without your offer that day by the fire, we might not have survived. Henry is a strong name for a boy who will need strength." Something shifted in Hank's expression, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I'm honored," he said simply. "Truly honored." The moment was interrupted by little Henry's increasingly insistent cries. Olivia adjusted her clothing to feed him, and Hank respectfully averted his eyes. "I should let you rest," he said, moving toward the wagon opening. "I'll be just outside if you need anything." "Hank," Olivia called softly as he was about to step down. When he turned, she said with all the sincerity in her heart, "Thank you for everything." He nodded once, his expression unreadable in the dim light, and then he was gone, leaving Olivia alone with her son and thoughts that kept returning to the man who had become far more important to her than she had ever intended. The days following Henry's birth were precarious. The tiny baby struggled to maintain his body temperature despite the warm flannel and heated stones. His suckling was weak, causing Olivia constant anxiety about whether he was receiving enough nourishment. Sleep came in brief intervals between feedings, leaving her exhausted but determined. Hank called a halt to the drive, announcing they would remain camped by the small stream where Henry had been born until Olivia and the baby were strong enough to travel. The men accepted this decision without complaint, using the time to rest the cattle and repair equipment. On the third day after the birth, Olivia emerged from her wagon for the first time, carrying Henry securely bundled against her chest. The cowboys gathered around, curious but respectful, each removing his hat as she approached. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice stronger than she felt, "I would like you to meet Henry Wilson." "He's mighty small," Billy observed with youthful candor. "But tough," Cooper added approvingly. "Got to be tough to start life on the trail." Jeb, who had helped bring Henry into the world, maintained a gruff exterior but couldn't hide the softness in his eyes when he looked at the baby. "He's filling out already. Good sign." The men's acceptance of her son brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes, tears she quickly blinked away. "Thank you all for your patience. I know this delay is inconvenient." "Ain't nothing inconvenient about new life, Miss Wilson," Frank said quietly, speaking for all of them. "We're proud to have Henry as part of our drive." Hank stood slightly apart, watching the interaction with an expression Olivia couldn't quite read. When their eyes met over the heads of the other men, something passed between them, a shared knowledge, a private understanding of what they had experienced together. That evening, after the men had eaten the simple supper Olivia had insisted on preparing despite Hank's objections that she should rest, he approached her wagon with a small bundle in his hands. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice low to avoid waking Henry if the baby was sleeping. "Of course," Olivia replied, setting aside the shirt she had been mending. Henry lay beside her on the bed, swaddled tightly in his yellow flannel. Hank's gaze went immediately to the infant, his expression softening. "How is he today?" "Stronger, I think," Olivia said, allowing hope to color her voice. "He's taking more milk and his cry has more force behind it." "Good," Hank nodded. "That's good." He hesitated, then held out the bundle he carried. "The men wanted to give you something, for Henry." Surprised, Olivia accepted the package and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small quilt, clearly handmade, pieced together from squares of various fabrics, a bit of bandana here, a piece of shirt there, all sewn with uneven but sturdy stitches. "They made this?" she asked, touched beyond words. "During the day while you were resting," Hank confirmed. "Cooper did most of the sewing learned from his mother, apparently. The rest contributed fabric and moral support." Olivia ran her fingers over the rough, textured quilt, imagining these tough cowboys bent over their work, creating something beautiful for her son. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Please thank them for me." "You can thank them yourself tomorrow," Hank said. "But I wanted to bring it tonight in case the night is cold." The unspoken fear that tiny Henry might not be strong enough to survive hung between them. Olivia laid the quilt gently over her son, tucking it around his small form. "He's going to live, Hank," she said with quiet determination. "I won't accept any other outcome." Hank sat on the edge of the wagon bed, careful not to disturb the baby. "If Will counts for anything, he'll grow to be as stubborn and strong as his mother." The compliment brought a smile to Olivia's tired face. "I prefer to think of it as determined." "Determined, then," Hank agreed, a rare smile lighting his features. He reached out hesitantly, then drew back. "May I?" Olivia nodded, understanding his request. Gently, Hank touched one finger to Henry's tiny hand. The baby reflexively gripped it, his entire fist not even encircling Hank's fingertip. "Strong grip," Hank observed, genuine wonder in his voice. "He's a fighter." "Like his namesake," Olivia said softly. Hank looked up, meeting her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Olivia." A sudden commotion from the direction of the cattle interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Shouts and the sound of running feet broke the evening calm. Hank was on his feet instantly, his expression shifting to alert concern. "Stay here," he instructed, already moving toward the wagon opening. "What's happening?" Olivia asked, instinctively gathering Henry closer. "Not sure," Hank replied, "but I intend to find out." He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Olivia clutching her son anxiously. Through the canvas covering of the wagon, she could hear raised voices and the unmistakable sound of agitated cattle. Her imagination conjured nightmarish scenarios: rustlers, wild animals, or worse. Nearly half an hour passed before Hank returned, his expression grim. "We had visitors," he reported. 3 men trying to cut a few head from the outer edge of the herd." "Rustlers?" Olivia asked, relieved that her worst fears hadn't materialized. "Maybe," Hank said, though his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. "They took off when Abe spotted them. Didn't get any cattle, but they left this behind." He held up a scrap of paper. "It was pinned to a tree at the edge of camp." Olivia took the paper with trembling fingers. In crude handwriting, it read simply, "Found you, watching." A chill ran through her. "Do you think that it's related to the man I saw in Sacramento, possibly?" Hank's face was hard with anger. "We'll double the night watch from now on. No one approaches this camp without being seen." "What if they're not after cattle at all?" Olivia voiced the fear taking shape in her mind. "What if they're after me, or Henry?" Hank sat beside her again, his presence solid and reassuring. Then they'll have to go through me first, and all the men. This drive protects its own, Olivia. The use of her given name, rare from his lips, emphasized the seriousness of his promise. Olivia felt tears threatening again, tears of gratitude and fear combined. "I never meant to bring trouble to you and your men," she whispered. "You haven't brought anything but goodness to this drive," Hank countered firmly. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together." He stood, adjusting his hat. "Try to rest. I'll be nearby all night." After he left, Olivia found sleep impossible despite her exhaustion. She kept Henry cradled against her chest, one hand resting on the tiny quilt the Cowboys had made, her mind racing with questions. Who would be pursuing her? What did they want? And how far would they go to get it? The drive remained in place for 5 more days, allowing Henry to gain strength and Olivia to recover from the birth. During this time, there were no further incidents with mysterious visitors, though Hank maintained the doubled night watch and insisted that Olivia never be alone, even within the camp. By the 6th day, Henry's improvement was noticeable. His cheeks had filled out slightly, and his cries had developed a healthy, demanding quality that reassured Olivia more than anything else could have. She pronounced him strong enough to travel, and Hank gave the order to resume the drive. "We'll take it slow," he promised as Billy prepared the cook wagon for Olivia and the baby. "Stop more frequently. The men understand." The resumed journey north presented new challenges. Caring for a newborn on the moving trail required all of Olivia's energy and ingenuity. She fashioned a sling to carry Henry against her chest while cooking, allowing her to maintain her duties while keeping him close and warm. The Cowboys adapted to the baby's presence with surprising ease, lowering their voices when he was sleeping and offering clumsy but sincere assistance when Olivia needed an extra hand. Hank remained a constant, steady presence, checking on them frequently and ensuring their needs were met before his own. Olivia caught him watching Henry with an expression that made her heart ache with unspoken possibilities. The drive crossed from California into Oregon territory 2 weeks after resuming travel. The landscape changed, subtly more verdant, with denser forests and meadows rich with spring flowers. The weather remained cooperative, with mild days and cool but not cold nights. Henry thrived despite the unconventional start to his life. By the time they were a week into Oregon, he had gained enough weight that his premature birth was less immediately apparent, though he remained smaller than a typical month-old baby. One evening, as the drive made camp in a picturesque meadow bordered by tall pines, Hank approached Olivia as she sat nursing Henry beneath a blanket for modesty. "May I join you?" he asked, removing his hat. "Of course," Olivia replied, shifting slightly to make room on the log where she sat. Hank settled beside her, his gaze directed politely away from her nursing child. "We're making good time. Should reach Portland in about 10 days if the weather holds." The news, which should have been welcome, filled Olivia with unexpected melancholy. Portland meant the end of the drive. The end of this strange, nomadic existence that had somehow become comfortable. The end of daily interactions with Hank Dawson. "That's good," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Have you written to your sister about our arrival?" "Sent a letter from the last trading post," Hank confirmed. "Asked her to look into possibilities for you and Henry." He hesitated, then added, "She's a good woman, Hannah. You'll like her." Olivia nodded, adjusting Henry as he finished nursing. "I'm sure I will." A silence fell between them, not the comfortable silence of shared understanding they had developed over weeks of travel, but something loaded with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Hank cleared his throat. "Olivia, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you, about the future." Her heart quickened at his serious tone. Yes. Before he could continue, Jeb approached at a rapid pace, his expression urgent. Boss, riders coming, 4 of them moving fast. Hank was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. Get the men ready. Olivia, take Henry to your wagon and stay there. Fear clutched at Olivia's heart as she gathered Henry against her shoulder. Hank, go, he said firmly. We'll handle this. With one last concerned glance, she hurried to the wagon, clutching Henry tightly as his small face crumpled in protest at the sudden movement. Inside, she settled him in his makeshift cradle, then peered anxiously through a small tear in the canvas covering. 4 riders were indeed approaching the camp at a rapid pace. They pulled up about 50 yards from where Hank and his men had gathered, weapons visible but not drawn. Even from a distance, Olivia could see that the lead rider was expensively dressed, his horse a fine specimen that spoke of wealth. The men exchanged words she couldn't hear. Then the lead rider dismounted and approached Hank on foot, hands held away from his body in a gesture of non-aggression. The 2 men spoke for several minutes, Hank's posture remaining tense throughout the conversation. Finally, to Olivia's alarm, Hank turned and pointed directly at her wagon. The stranger nodded, then followed as Hank began walking in her direction. Panic seized her. Should she run? But where would she go with a newborn in the wilderness? Should she hide Henry? But there was nowhere in the small wagon that would conceal a baby, especially if he cried. Before she could decide on a course of action, Hank's voice came from just outside. Olivia, there's someone here who wants to speak with you. I'll be right beside you the whole time. The implied reassurance that she was not being handed over to someone against Hank's gave her courage. You may enter, she called, gathering Henry into her arms as a shield and comfort both. The canvas flap lifted, and a man stepped into the wagon. As he straightened to his full height, Olivia gasped in shock. Hello, Livy, said Samuel Everett, looking exactly as he had the day he left Petaluma with promises of return. It's been a while. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Samuel, how? Why? Hank climbed into the wagon behind Samuel, his expression thunderous despite his controlled movements. Mr. Everett claims he's been searching for you since discovering you left Petaluma, he explained, his voice carefully neutral. Says he returned to marry you as promised but found you gone. Samuel nodded, his handsome face arranged in an expression of earnest concern. Your father wouldn't tell me where you'd gone, Livy. Said you'd disgraced the family and he'd washed his hands of you. It took me months to pick up your trail. Olivia stared at the man who had fathered her child and then abandoned her to face the consequences alone. He looked prosperous, well-fed, his clothing of fine quality and his hands uncalloused by hard work. You left me, she said, finding her voice at last. You promised to return in a month. It's been nearly a year. Samuel had the grace to look shamefaced. Business complications delayed me. By the time I could return, it was later than planned. I never intended to abandon you, Livy. The familiar nickname, once spoken with affection, now felt like a mockery. Olivia looked down at Henry, who had fallen asleep in her arms, unaware of the momentous meeting taking place. This is your son, she said, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions inside her. His name is Henry. He was born 3 weeks ago on this cattle drive. Samuel stepped forward, his expression changing to one of wonder as he beheld the small bundle. My son, truly? Yes, Olivia confirmed, resisting the urge to pull Henry away from his father's gaze. He's perfect, Samuel whispered, reaching out as if to touch the baby. Olivia shifted slightly, a protective movement that did not go unnoticed by either man in the wagon. Samuel withdrew his hand, looking hurt, while Hank's expression remained carefully blank. I've come to make things right, Livy, Samuel said earnestly. I have a successful business now in San Francisco. A house. I can provide for you and our son as I promised. We can be married immediately and give him a proper name. The offer, everything she had once desperately wanted, now rang hollow to Olivia's ears. She looked from Samuel to Hank, whose blue eyes revealed nothing of his thoughts, and then down at Henry, peacefully sleeping against her heart. "How did you find me?" she asked, avoiding a direct response to Samuel's proposal. A flicker of something discomfort perhaps crossed Samuel's face. "I hired men to make inquiries. When I heard about a pregnant woman traveling with a cattle drive, I hoped it might be you." Hank's jaw tightened. "Were your men instructed to leave threatening notes and attempt to steal cattle?" Samuel looked genuinely surprised. "What? No, of course not. I hired them to locate Olivia, not to cause trouble." "Yet trouble found us," Hank observed dryly. "Twice. My men can be overzealous," Samuel admitted. "But I assure you, any wrongdoing was not by my order. I only wanted to find Olivia and my child." A silence fell over the wagon, broken only by Henry's soft breathing. Finally, Samuel spoke again, his voice pleading. "Livy, please come back with me. Let me make amends, for our son's sake, if not for ours." Olivia closed her eyes briefly, trying to organize her chaotic thoughts. The man before her was offering legitimacy, security, and a father for Henry, all things society deemed essential. Yet something within her resisted the neat solution he presented. "I need time to consider," she said finally. "This is unexpected." Samuel nodded, visibly relieved that she hadn't rejected him outright. "Of course. We're camped just over the ridge. I'll return tomorrow for your answer." He glanced at Hank, then back to Olivia. "I do love you, Livy. I always intended to return." With that, he ducked out of the wagon, leaving Olivia and Hank alone with the sleeping baby. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Hank said quietly, "He seems sincere." "Does he?" Olivia couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "He seemed sincere when he promised to return in a month, too." Hank shifted uncomfortably. "It would be a secure future for you and Henry, a respected name." "Yes," Olivia agreed, though the word tasted like ashes in her mouth. "Very practical." Another silence fell, heavier than the first. Finally, Hank moved toward the wagon opening. "I'll let you rest. Think about what you want, Olivia. What's best for you and your son." As he was about to step down, Olivia found her voice again. "What were you going to tell me?" Before the riders came, Hank paused, his back to her. For a moment she thought he might not answer. Then, without turning, he said, "It doesn't matter now. You have options I couldn't offer." And with that, he was gone, leaving Olivia with more questions than answers and a heart suddenly, painfully aware of what it truly wanted. Sleep eluded Olivia that night as she weighed Samuel's unexpected proposal against the life she had begun to envision for herself in Oregon. Henry woke frequently, unusually fussy, as if sensing his mother's distress. By dawn, Olivia's eyes were gritty with exhaustion, but her mind was clear. She emerged from her wagon to find Hank already awake, sitting alone by the rekindled morning fire. Without hesitation, she joined him, settling Henry in his sling against her chest. "You've decided," Hank observed, not a question but a statement. "Yes," Olivia confirmed. "I wanted you to be the first to know." Hank nodded, his gaze fixed on the flames. "You'll go with him?" "No." The single word hung between them for a moment before Hank's head snapped up, his blue eyes wide with surprise. "No," Olivia shook her head. "I won't marry Samuel, not now, not ever." "But he's Henry's father," Hank said, as if reminding her of a fact she might have overlooked. "He can give the boy his name, a respectable future." "Henry already has a name," Olivia replied firmly. "And respectability isn't worth building a life on lies and broken promises." She took a deep breath. "I don't love Samuel, Hank. I'm not sure I ever did, truly. I was young and flattered by the attention of a sophisticated man who seemed to see me as more than just the doctor's dutiful daughter. Hank's expression remained unreadable, but something in his posture had changed, a tension releasing, perhaps. What will you tell him? The truth. That I've made a life for myself and Henry that doesn't include him, that his offer comes too late and asks too much. He might not accept that easily, Hank warned. Men like Everett are used to getting what they want. Then he will learn a valuable lesson, Olivia said with quiet determination, because what he wants is not his to claim anymore. A ghost of a smile touched Hank's lips. You've changed since Fairfield, Olivia Wilson. Yes, she agreed. I've learned what I'm capable of, what I deserve. She hesitated, then added softly, and what I want. The air between them seemed to charge with unspoken possibilities. Hank turned fully toward her, his expression open in a way she had rarely seen. "What is it that you want, Olivia?" he asked, his voice low and intense. Before she could answer, Billy's voice called from the edge of camp. "Riders coming, boss, it's them again." The moment shattered as Hank stood, his hand moving to his pistol. "Stay here," he instructed Olivia, already striding toward where the men were gathering. Olivia remained by the fire, holding Henry close as she watched Samuel and his companions approach the camp. The tension in Hank's stance was visible even from a distance as he moved to intercept them. The conversation appeared civil but strained, with Samuel gesturing occasionally toward where Olivia sat. Finally, after several minutes of discussion, Hank nodded and turned, walking back toward the fire with Samuel following a few paces behind. "Mr. Everett would like to speak with you," Hank said formally when he reached her. "I told him 5 minutes." Samuel stepped forward, his handsome face set in lines of determination. "Olivia, have you considered my proposal?" "I have," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I must decline." Samuel blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct refusal. "Livy, be reasonable. Think of our son. What kind of life can you offer him without a husband, without my support?" "An honest one," Olivia said simply. "One built on genuine care rather than obligation." Anger flashed across Samuel's features. "This is absurd. You can't raise a child alone, especially not one with my blood. He deserves my name, my position in society." "What Henry deserves is love and constancy," Olivia countered, her voice remaining calm despite the trembling in her hands. "Something you've yet to demonstrate you can provide." Samuel's face reddened. "I made one mistake. You made a choice," Olivia corrected. "And now I'm making mine. Goodbye, Samuel." For a moment it seemed he might argue further, then his expression hardened. "This isn't over, Olivia. That boy is my son, and I have rights." "Your time is up, Mr. Everett," Hank interjected, stepping slightly forward, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I suggest you return to your camp and consider your next move carefully." Samuel's eyes darted between them, narrowing slightly. "I see how it is. Found yourself a new protector, have you, Livy? Does he know he's raising another man's bastard?" The crude words had barely left his mouth before Hank's hand shot out, grabbing Samuel by the collar and pulling him close. "That's enough," Hank said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You'll apologize to Miss Wilson, then leave this camp without another word, or you'll leave with considerably more difficulty. Your choice." Fear flickered in Samuel's eyes as he registered the very real threat in Hank's manner. "I apologize for my language," he muttered. "But this isn't finished." Hank released him with a slight shove. "Yes, it is. Miss Wilson has given you her answer. I suggest you respect it." With a final, venomous glance at Olivia, Samuel turned and strode back to his waiting companions. The 4 men rode away at a swift pace, disappearing over the ridge from which they had come. When they were gone, Olivia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said softly to Hank. He turned to her, his expression grave. "He's right about one thing. This might not be over. Men like that don't accept defeat easily." "I know," Olivia acknowledged, "but I couldn't accept his proposal, Hank, not when." "Not when what?" he prompted when she didn't continue. Olivia gathered her courage. "Not when my heart is elsewhere." Understanding dawned in Hank's eyes, followed by a cautious hope. "Olivia, boss," Cooper's voice interrupted from across the camp. "The cattle are restless. Think we should get moving before they start scattering." Hank glanced in Cooper's direction, then back at Olivia, conflict evident in his expression. "We'll continue this conversation," he promised, his voice low and intense. "Tonight." With that, he turned to issue orders for breaking camp, leaving Olivia with the bittersweet certainty that she had made the right choice, regardless of what might come of it. The drive moved northward that day at a steady pace, putting distance between themselves and Samuel's camp. Olivia rode inside the wagon with Henry, using the time to contemplate what she would say to Hank when evening came. The certainty of her feelings for him had been growing for weeks, perhaps since that first day when he had said those simple, life-changing words, "Come sit by me." But confessing such feelings was another matter entirely. Hank was a respected trail boss with prospects and a reputation to maintain. She was an unwed mother with no dowry, no family connections, and a newborn child. What future could they possibly build together, even if he returned her feelings? By the time the drive made camp that evening, Olivia had worked herself into a state of nervous anticipation. She prepared supper mechanically, her thoughts elsewhere as she served the men their usual hearty portions. Hank was conspicuously absent from the evening meal. When she inquired, Jeb informed her that the boss was riding the perimeter, checking for any sign of pursuit from Samuel and his men. "Don't worry, Miss Wilson," the older man reassured her. "Boss won't let anything happen to you or little Henry." "I know," Olivia said softly. "He's a good man." Jeb's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "The best I've ever worked for, and that's saying something, considering my years." After the meal was cleared away and Henry fed and settled for his evening nap, Olivia sat by the fire, waiting. The camp gradually quieted as the men retired to their bedrolls, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the crackling flames. It was fully dark when Hank finally returned, dismounting his horse at the edge of camp and approaching the fire with measured steps. His face, illuminated by the flickering light, was serious but not grim. "Any sign of them?" Olivia asked as he lowered himself onto the log beside her. Hank shook his head. "They've moved on, at least for now, heading south from what I could tell." Relief washed over her. "Do you think they've given up?" "Possibly," Hank said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "We'll maintain extra vigilance just in case." They sat in silence for a moment, both aware of the unfinished conversation from that morning hanging between them. Finally, Hank spoke again. "You said your heart was elsewhere," he began, his voice low but steady. "Did you mean that?" Olivia met his gaze directly, finding courage in the warmth she saw there. "Yes, I meant it. Even knowing everything it would mean, the challenges, the talk." Hank's expression was serious, his blue eyes searching hers for any hint of uncertainty. "I've endured worse talk than loving an honorable man," Olivia replied simply. "And challenges don't frighten me anymore, not after everything I've survived." Hank reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong around her smaller fingers. "I need you to know something, Olivia. What I was going to tell you yesterday before Samuel arrived." "Yes," she prompted when he hesitated. I was going to ask if you would consider staying in Oregon. Not just anywhere in Oregon, but on my ranch. Surprise widened Olivia's eyes. Your ranch? But I thought that I was just a hired trail boss. Hank smiled slightly. For this drive, yes, but the cattle we're bringing north are mine. I'm establishing my own operation outside Portland on land I purchased last year. You never said, Olivia murmured, trying to absorb this new information. I'm not one for talking about myself, Hank admitted, but I wanted you to know that I could offer you and Henry a home, a future. His fingers tightened slightly around hers. Not out of charity or obligation, Olivia, but because somewhere between Fairfield and here, I fell in love with a woman of extraordinary courage and grace. The words, spoken with such simple sincerity, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. Hank, let me finish, he said gently. I know it might seem too soon. You've been through so much, and the last thing I want is to pressure you, but I couldn't let you go without telling you how I feel, without offering you a choice beyond what Samuel proposed. Olivia found herself speechless, overwhelmed by the declaration from this man who had become the center of her world without her fully realizing it. I don't know what to say, she whispered finally. You don't need to say anything now, Hank assured her. We have time. The drive won't reach Portland for another 10 days. You can think about what you want, what's best for you and Henry. Olivia shook her head, squeezing his hand. I don't need time, Hank. I've had weeks of watching you, of seeing your integrity and kindness, of feeling something grow between us that I never expected to find again, something deeper and truer than anything I've known before. She took a deep breath. I love you too, and nothing would make me happier than building a future with you if you're certain that's what you want. The smile that transformed Hank's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then suddenly brilliant. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward. Olivia met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was gentle yet filled with promise. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. When they parted, Hank rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this properly, Olivia. Court you as you deserve. Marry you when you're ready, not because convention demands it. I would like that, she whispered. Very much. From the wagon nearby, Henry's cry pierced the night, a hungry, insistent demand that made both of them smile. Seems the young man has an opinion, Hank observed, helping Olivia to her feet. He usually does, Olivia replied with a soft laugh. You should know that if you're considering taking us both on. I look forward to hearing all his opinions, Hank said, walking her to the wagon. And yours. For many years to come. As Olivia climbed into the wagon to tend to her son, she felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that had eluded her since long before her banishment from Petaluma. Here, under the vast Oregon sky, she had found not just shelter but a home, not in a place, but in the heart of a man who saw her worth when others saw only her shame. The remaining days of the cattle drive passed in a blur of quiet joy for Olivia. The relationship between her and Hank remained largely proper in front of the men, but small gestures, his hand lingering on hers when passing a coffee cup, private smiles exchanged across the evening fire, moments of conversation away from the others spoke volumes about their growing connection. The cowboys, perceptive despite their rough exteriors, noticed the change. Olivia caught knowing glances and suppressed smiles, particularly from Jeb, whose gruff manner couldn't quite hide his approval. Henry continued to thrive, gaining strength daily. His resemblance to Olivia grew more pronounced as his features filled out her brown eyes, the slight cleft in his chin, the curl of his tiny ears. If he carried any of Samuel's looks, they weren't yet apparent, a small mercy for which Olivia was silently grateful. As they approached the outskirts of Portland, anticipation and nervousness battled within Olivia. The drive had become familiar, a way of life she understood. Ahead lay new challenges, meeting Hank's sister, establishing herself in a community that might well judge her as Petaluma had, and navigating the unfamiliar territory of a relationship with Hank beyond the confines of the trail. The evening before they were due to reach their destination, Hank found her sitting alone by the wagon, Henry sleeping peacefully in his improvised cradle. "Nervous?" he asked, settling beside her. "A little," Olivia admitted. "Everything will change tomorrow." Hank nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Change can be frightening, but I want you to know something, Olivia. Whatever happens, whatever challenges we face, you won't face them alone. Not ever again." The promise warmed her from within. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to picture the place that might become her home. Hank's face softened with pride. "It's not grand yet, 400 acres in a valley about 10 miles outside Portland. Good water, rich soil. The house is simple but sound, 2 bedrooms with a front porch that catches the morning sun." He paused, then added with a hint of shyness, "I built it myself last year between cattle drives." "It sounds wonderful," Olivia said sincerely. "It needs a woman's touch," Hank admitted. "And room for a family to grow. I always plan to add on as needed." The implication that he envisioned not just Henry but perhaps other children in their future sent a wave of emotion through Olivia. "I'd like to see it," she said softly, "to imagine what it might become." "You will," Hank promised, "tomorrow, and Hannah is eager to meet you. Her letter was full of questions about this remarkable woman I wrote about." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "What did you tell her about me?" "The truth," Hank replied simply. "That you're the strongest, most determined person I've ever met. That you make the best biscuits west of the Mississippi. That you've captured my heart completely." The frank admission, spoken without embellishment or flattery, meant more to Olivia than any poetic declaration could have. "I hope she approves," she murmured. "She will," Hank said with certainty. "Hannah has never been one to judge others, and she's been telling me for years that I need to find a woman with enough backbone to keep me in line." Olivia laughed softly. "Is that what I do?" "That and more," Hank said, his expression growing serious. "You make me want to be better, Olivia, worthy of what you offer." Impulsively, she leaned forward and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "You already are." The following morning, the drive set out for the final stretch to Portland. As they crested a hill around midday, the city came into view in the distance, nestled against the Columbia River with Mount Hood rising majestically beyond. "There it is," Hank said, riding up beside the wagon where Olivia sat with Henry. "Your new home." The words sent a thrill through her, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "It's beautiful country," she observed, taking in the lush green landscape so different from the dusty streets of Petaluma. "The ranch is southwest of the city," Hank explained. "We'll drive the cattle there directly. Hannah will meet us there, sent word ahead when we pass the last trading post." The final miles seemed to pass quickly. By late afternoon, they had reached a rolling valley where a modest but well-built cabin stood on a gentle rise, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. A woman waited on the porch, shading her eyes against the setting sun as she watched their approach. Even from a distance, the family resemblance was clear. Hannah Dawson shared her brother's tall stature and direct gaze, though her hair was a shade lighter and worn in a practical braid that hung down her back. As they drew closer, she descended the porch steps and walked out to meet them, her stride purposeful but welcoming. "About time you got here, brother," she called, her voice carrying easily across the yard. "Starting to think you'd taken the scenic route." Hank dismounted with a grin, embracing his sister warmly. "Had precious cargo this trip, Hannah. Had to take it careful." Hannah's gaze moved to Olivia, who was just climbing down from the wagon with Henry securely in his sling. "So this is the famous Miss Wilson and little Henry," she said, approaching with an outstretched hand. "I've been looking forward to meeting you both." Olivia accepted the handshake, immediately put at ease by Hannah's straightforward manner. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Dawson. Your brother has spoken highly of you." "It's Mrs. Fletcher, actually widowed 3 years now," Hannah corrected without a trace of self-pity. "And please call me Hannah. Any woman who can cook for 8 cowboys while delivering a baby on the trail is already family as far as I'm concerned." The warm welcome brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. "Thank you," she managed. "That means more than you know." Hannah's expression softened as she looked at Henry's small face peering from the sling. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the baby. Olivia nodded, carefully transferring Henry to Hannah's capable arms. The midwife examined him with a professional eye, then broke into a smile. "He's doing remarkably well for one born so early," she pronounced. "Strong heartbeat, good color. You've done an excellent job with him, Olivia." "We had help," Olivia said, glancing at Hank, who was giving instructions to the men regarding the cattle. "Everyone on the drive contributed to keeping him warm and safe." "So my brother wrote," Hannah said, her eyes twinkling. "Seemed particularly invested in this little one's welfare from the beginning." A blush crept into Olivia's cheeks. "He's been very kind." "Hank is many things stubborn, occasionally grumpy. Too serious for his own good sometimes, but he's never kind without meaning it deeply," Hannah observed, returning Henry to Olivia's arms. "Now, you both must be exhausted. I've prepared the house and have supper nearly ready. The men can make camp by the corral as usual." As Hank rejoined them, Hannah turned to her brother. "The east bedroom is ready for Olivia and the baby. I assume you'll take your usual room." The question carried an undercurrent that made Hank's ears redden slightly. "Of course," he replied firmly. "Everything's proper, Hannah," his sister laughed. "I never suggested otherwise, just checking the sleeping arrangements." She turned back to Olivia. "Come inside and rest. You've had a long journey." The interior of Hank's home was exactly as he had described, simple but well crafted, with large windows that would indeed catch the morning sun. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace along one wall and handmade furniture, arranged for comfort rather than show. 2 doors led off to bedrooms, and a small loft space was visible above. "It's lovely," Olivia said sincerely, taking in the solid craftsmanship evident in every beam and board. "Hank built most of it himself," Hannah said proudly. "Always was good with his hands. Unlike my sister, who can barely hammer a nail without injury." Hank teased, the easy banter between siblings warming the room as surely as the fire crackling in the hearth. The evening passed pleasantly, with Hannah serving a hearty stew and fresh bread while regaling Olivia with stories of their childhood in Missouri, before the family moved west. Hank occasionally interjected to correct what he claimed were exaggerations, but his eyes crinkled with amusement at his sister's animated storytelling. After the meal, Hannah insisted on washing up while Hank showed Olivia around the property in the fading light. With Henry bundled warmly against the evening chill, they walked the boundaries of what could be a vegetable garden, discussed the possibility of fruit trees, and admired the sturdy barn where Hank planned to expand his horse breeding operation alongside the cattle. "What do you think?" he asked as they stood watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and pink. "Could you be happy here?" Olivia looked up at him, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, and felt her heart expand with certainty. "Yes, Hank, I believe I could be very happy here, with you." His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Good," he said simply, taking her free hand in his, "because I can't imagine this place or my life without you in it anymore." Later that night, as Olivia prepared for bed in the comfortable room Hannah had readied for her, there was a soft knock at the door. Hannah stood outside, a steaming cup in her hands. "Chamomile tea," she explained, offering it to Olivia. "Helps with sleep after a long journey." "Thank you," Olivia said, accepting the cup gratefully. "For everything. Your welcome has been so warm." Hannah settled on the edge of the bed, watching as Olivia checked on Henry in his improvised cradle, a dresser drawer padded with soft blankets. "May I speak frankly, Olivia?" "Of course," Olivia replied, sitting beside her and sipping the fragrant tea. "My brother is in love with you," Hannah stated without preamble. "Completely, utterly in love in a way I've never seen him before. His letters about you changed from respect to admiration to something much deeper over these past weeks." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "He's told me as much." Hannah nodded, satisfied. "Good. Hank was never one to hide his feelings once he recognized them. But what I want to know is this. Are your feelings equally certain? Because my brother has never given his heart before, and I wouldn't see it broken." The direct question deserved an equally direct answer. "I love him, Hannah. Not out of gratitude or convenience or necessity, though I'm grateful for all he's done. I love his integrity, his quiet strength, his gentleness with Henry. I love the man he is when no one is watching, the same man he is when everyone is." Hannah studied her face for a long moment, then broke into a wide smile. "Good answer, the right answer." She reached out and squeezed Olivia's hand. "I think you'll be very happy together, and I'm delighted to welcome you as a sister, even with my circumstances." Olivia couldn't help asking, gesturing toward Henry. Hannah's expression turned serious. "Olivia, I'm a midwife. I've seen women in every circumstance imaginable, some with husbands who treat them terribly, some without husbands who are the most devoted mothers I've ever met. Life is too complex for simple judgments." She glanced at the sleeping baby. "That child is a blessing, regardless of how he came to be, and any woman who endures what you have to protect her child has my respect, not my censure." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes at the acceptance she had so rarely experienced since discovering her pregnancy. "Thank you," she whispered. Hannah patted her hand. "Rest now. Tomorrow is the beginning of your new life here. And knowing my brother, he'll want to show you every fence post and cow on the property before midday." The prediction proved accurate. After breakfast the following morning, during which Hannah tactfully made herself scarce, mentioning errands in town, Hank took Olivia on a more extensive tour of the ranch. The Cowboys had already begun the work of settling the cattle into their new pastures, and the routine of the drive was giving way to the different rhythm of ranch life. As they walked the property, Henry sleeping contentedly in the sling, Hank pointed out his plans for expansion, areas where he hoped to improve irrigation, and the spot where he thought a larger house might someday stand. "Of course, that's all in the future," he added hastily. "No need to think about such things yet." Olivia smiled at his careful approach. "It's good to have plans, Hank, to build towards something." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Olivia, I want to be clear about something. I meant what I said about courting you properly. I won't rush you into marriage or any commitment until you're absolutely certain." "And if I told you I'm already certain," Olivia asked softly, "that I don't need months of courtship to know my own heart?" Hank's expression grew serious. "I'd say that after everything you've been through, You deserve time to settle into this new life without pressure, to be sure that what you feel for me isn't tied to the extraordinary circumstances we've shared." His consideration touched her deeply. "That's very thoughtful, and wise, perhaps. But I want you to know that my feelings won't change, Hank. I've had more time to consider my heart and my choices in these past months than most people have in years." Hank reached out, gently touching her cheek. "Then we'll take each day as it comes, together. And when the time is right, I'll ask you properly, with a ring and everything a woman deserves." "I'll look forward to that day," Olivia replied, leaning slightly into his touch. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by Henry's soft sighs and the distant lowing of cattle. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the land that would become her home, Olivia felt a sense of peace she had thought forever lost when her father closed the door on her life in Petaluma. The weeks that followed established a new pattern for Olivia. The cowboys of the drive gradually dispersed, some returning south for other work. Others, like Jeb and young Billy, accepting Hank's offer of permanent positions on the ranch. Hannah visited often, becoming both friend and mentor to Olivia as she adjusted to life in Oregon. Henry grew stronger daily, his premature birth becoming less apparent as he reached developmental milestones with determination that made his namesake proud. Hank took to fatherhood with natural ease, spending evenings with the baby on his chest, telling stories of cattle drives and horse breaking that made Olivia smile at their inappropriateness for an infant. Word of their arrangement spread through the nearby communities, of course. Occasionally, Olivia caught disapproving glances when she accompanied Hank to Portland for supplies or church services. But for every look of judgment, there seemed to be one of acceptance, particularly from the frontier women who understood that survival often required unconventional choices. Hannah's endorsement went far in easing Olivia's acceptance in the community. As a respected midwife, her opinion carried weight, and she made a point of introducing Olivia to her friends and clients with warmth and obvious approval. 3 months after their arrival in Oregon, on a warm summer evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Henry sleeping in a proper cradle Hank had crafted, Olivia received an unexpected letter. The Portland postmark confused her until she opened it and recognized her mother's handwriting. "It's from my mother," she told Hank, her hands trembling slightly. "But how did she know where to find me?" "Read it," Hank encouraged gently. "Perhaps it explains." The letter was brief but heartfelt. "My dearest Olivia, your letter from Sacramento reached me and lifted the heaviest burden from my heart. I have prayed daily for your safety and well-being. Your father's health has declined rapidly these past months. In his weakened state, he confessed his regret at sending you away and asked me to find you if possible. I wrote to every postmaster between Sacramento and Portland, describing you and asking for information. The kind postmaster in Portland replied that he believed you were living outside the city on the Dawson Ranch. I pray this letter finds you there. Please know that you remain in my heart always. If circumstances permit, I would dearly love to see you and meet my grandchild." With endless love, mother tears blurred Olivia's vision as she finished reading. "She's been searching for me," she whispered, "and father regrets what he did." Hank placed his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "What do you want to do?" Olivia considered the question carefully. "I'd like to write back. Let her know about Henry, about our life here, perhaps invite her to visit if she's able." "I think that's a fine idea," Hank agreed. "Your mother sounds like a woman who deserves to know her grandson and her daughter's happiness." Olivia leaned against him, grateful for his understanding. "So much has changed in a year. Sometimes I can hardly believe the journey that brought me here." From banishment to belonging, Hank murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Though I have to say, I'm grateful for your father's poor judgment. Without it, you might never have wandered into Fairfield that day. And you might never have said those life-changing words, Olivia added with a smile. Come sit by me, the kindest invitation I've ever received. Hank's expression turned serious. I have another invitation for you, Olivia Wilson. One I've been waiting to offer until I felt you were truly settled here, until I was certain you had found your place in this community and on this land. Her heart quickened as he shifted to face her directly, taking both her hands in his. Yes, I love you, Hank said simply. I love Henry as if he were my own son. I want to build a life with you both, not because you need my protection or my name, but because I can't imagine my future without you in it. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. I'm asking you to marry me, Olivia. To be my wife, Henry's mother, and the heart of this home we've begun to create together. From the pouch, he produced a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect pearl. It was my grandmother's, he explained. Hannah insisted I should have it for when the right woman came along. She was right, as usual. Emotion closed Olivia's throat as she looked from the ring to Hank's face, seeing all the love and hope written there. Yes, she managed finally. Yes, I will marry you, Hank Dawson, with all my heart, yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the perfect fit seemed symbolic of how she had found her place in this new life, not through compromise or necessity, but through genuine love and mutual respect. Their kiss, tender but filled with promise, sealed the commitment between them. When they parted, Hank kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. I was thinking, he said softly, that September would be a beautiful time for a wedding. The harvest will be in, the weather still fair. September sounds perfect, Olivia agreed. Time enough for my mother to come if she's able. And for me to add that second bedroom I've been planning, Hank added with a smile. So Henry can have his own space when the time comes. The implication that they might someday expand their family further warmed Olivia's heart. He'd like that, I think, though he seems quite content with his current arrangements. As if on cue, Henry stirred in his cradle, making the soft noises that signaled he would soon be fully awake and demanding attention. Hank reached over to rock the cradle gently, his large hand looking so tender against the polished wood. We're a family already, he observed. The wedding will just make official what we already know in our hearts. Yes, Olivia agreed, watching the man she loved soothe her son back to sleep with the patience and gentleness that had first drawn her to him. We are a family, against all odds and expectations. 6 weeks later, on a perfect September morning, Olivia Wilson became Olivia Dawson in a simple ceremony on the porch of the ranch house. Hannah stood as witness, beaming with approval. Jeb and Billy represented the Cowboys who had become like family during the long drive north. And in a development that had seemed impossible months earlier, Sarah Wilson sat in a place of honor, Henry on her lap, tears of joy streaming down her face as she watched her daughter begin a new chapter. He would have been proud, Sarah whispered to Olivia after the ceremony, referring to the husband who had passed away just weeks before, never having the chance to make amends in person. Despite everything, he loved you. In the end, he understood that love is what matters most. I know, Mother, Olivia replied, finding that forgiveness came easier now that she had found her own happiness. And I'm so grateful you're here to share this day. As friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate with a feast that showcased Olivia's renowned cooking skills, she found a moment alone with Hank at the edge of the festivities. Happy, Mrs. Dawson? He asked, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she had come to love. "Completely, Mr. Dawson," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I still can't quite believe the journey that brought us here." Hank's arms tightened around her. "From banishment to belonging," he repeated his earlier observation. "A long road, but one that led exactly where you were meant to be." Olivia thought of all the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment: the shame and rejection in Petaluma, the desperate days in Fairfield, the unexpected kindness of a cowboy who had seen her worth when she felt worthless, the premature birth that had terrified her but ultimately strengthened the bonds between them, the confrontation with Samuel that had clarified her heart's true desires. "I wouldn't change any of it," she realized aloud, "even the painful parts. They all led me to you, to this place, to the family we're building." "Then I'm grateful for every step of that journey," Hank said, bending to kiss her softly. "Even the ones that hurt you, though I promise the road ahead will be smoother. With occasional bumps, I'm sure," Olivia laughed. "Life is never perfectly smooth." "No," Hank agreed, "but it's better traveled together." As they rejoined their guests, Olivia paused to watch her mother bouncing Henry on her knee, Hannah chatting animatedly with neighbors, and the cowboys who had become family raising glasses in celebration. The sense of belonging, of finally being exactly where she was meant to be, filled her heart to overflowing. From banished daughter to beloved wife, from frightened mother-to-be to confident parent, from wanderer to home builder, Olivia's journey had transformed her in ways she never could have imagined that fateful day when her father ordered her from Petaluma. And it had all begun with 4 simple words from a kind-hearted cowboy: "Come sit by me." 3 years later, on a bright spring morning much like the one when Henry had entered the world, Olivia Dawson gave birth to her second child, a daughter they named Sarah Hannah, honoring both grandmothers. Unlike Henry's dramatic arrival, Sarah was born in the comfortable bedroom of the expanded ranch house, with Hannah serving as midwife and Hank holding Olivia's hand through every contraction. 3-year-old Henry, now a sturdy boy with his mother's eyes and his adoptive father's serious expression, was the first to visit his new sister, approaching the bed where Olivia rested with appropriate caution, instilled by numerous warnings about being gentle. "She's very small," he observed, peering at the bundle in Olivia's arms. "You were even smaller when you were born," Hank told him, lifting the boy to sit carefully on the bed beside Olivia. "But look how strong you've grown. Will she grow strong too?" Henry asked, reaching out one tentative finger to touch his sister's tiny hand. "Yes, my love," Olivia assured him. "With you to watch over her and teach her, she'll be very strong indeed." As her small family gathered around her, Hank's proud smile, Henry's curious inspection of his new sister, baby Sarah's contented sighs, Olivia felt the fullness of a joy she had once thought forever denied her. The Dawson Ranch had prospered over the 3 years since their wedding. Hank's cattle operation had expanded, with Jeb serving as foreman and Billy growing into a capable young cowhand. The house had been enlarged as promised, with a proper bedroom for Henry and a nursery for the new baby. Olivia's vegetable garden flourished, supplying not only their table but producing enough excess to sell in Portland. Sarah Wilson had visited twice more since the wedding, staying for extended periods and forming a close bond with her grandson. In her latest letter, she had hinted at the possibility of selling the Petaluma house and moving permanently to Oregon, a prospect that delighted Olivia and amused Hank, who had developed a genuine fondness for his mother-in-law. As for Samuel Everett, they had heard nothing more after that day in the Oregon wilderness. Whatever his intentions had been regarding his son, they had apparently been abandoned in favor of his business interests in San Francisco. Olivia felt only relief at his absence. particularly after Hank had legally adopted Henry shortly after their wedding, giving the boy his name and the security of a father who had chosen him deliberately and lovingly. Life had settled into a rhythm of work and joy, challenges met together, and celebrations shared. The community that had initially viewed Olivia with some suspicion now embraced her as one of their own, the doctor's daughter from California, who had found her true calling as a rancher's wife in Oregon. "What are you thinking about?" Hank asked softly, noticing her distant expression as she nursed their newborn daughter. Olivia smiled up at him, at the man who had changed her life with a simple act of kindness. "I was thinking about journeys," she replied. "About how the most difficult roads sometimes lead to the most beautiful destinations." Hank nodded, understanding as he always did. Like a certain young woman who wandered into a cattle camp in Fairfield. "And a certain cowboy who offered her a place by his fire," Olivia completed, reaching for his hand. "Thank you, Hank, for everything." "No," he said, raising her fingers to his lips. "Thank you, Olivia Dawson, for wandering into my life and making it infinitely richer than I ever imagined it could be." Outside the window of their bedroom, the Oregon spring painted the ranch in vibrant greens and golds, promising renewal and growth. Inside, surrounded by the family she had fought so hard to create and protect, Olivia Wilson Dawson knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just shelter, but true belonging, the belonging that comes not from place or circumstance, but from being truly seen, valued, and loved for exactly who you are. The long journey from banishment to belonging had ended, and the even longer, richer journey of family had just begun.